Now, the tourism sector is slowly recovering from COVID-19's impact. Hotels seem to be the driving force behind the accommodation sector's post-pandemic recovery. That's according to Stats SA's December 2022 tourism accommodation report. It claims that accommodation income increased by 46.7% compared to the fourth quarter of 2021. Hotels seeming the biggest contributors. To discuss this further, we're joined by Fedhasa's National Chairperson, Rosemary, who joins us virtually from the Vaal. Rosemary, thanks for your time and very happy to hear that you are dry and safe in the Vaal, but thanks for making it possible for us to get your reaction to these numbers. Encouraging figures indeed, especially in the hotel sector, but I believe in terms of what you're receiving, in terms of reports from your members, that your accommodation numbers are even better than what Stats SA is reporting.
Yes, Stats SA figure for December was in the 40s, whereas our members in Fedhasa are actually reporting figures in excess of 60% occupancy. Cape Town had a bumper month in December. Johannesburg also did. Johannesburg was very lucky. It also had the ANC conference. There were like 4,000 delegates, and then obviously all the other team players too. So December was a very, very good month. And as I said, our members are definitely reporting figures higher than what Stats SA reported, which was in the 40s. Some of our members are reporting in the 80% occupancy, but generally on average it comes up to the mid-60s.
Why is that figure in terms of hotel accommodation so important, or just accommodation in general important? Because obviously you're talking about beds and rooms and units being taken up in whatever city you're focusing on, but then you also need to focus on what those tourists or visitors are doing, how much money they are spending when they leave those rooms and units as well.
Absolutely. That's why tourism and hospitality is such a benefit to South Africa, because even if you look at, for example, the sporting events we've had coming up. When people come to spend time in a city, they buy petrol, they buy things at a cafe, they go to a restaurant, they buy things from traders along the street. Everyone benefits from tourism. It's the most wonderful way of bringing forex into our country, and it's totally underestimated. I wish more emphasis was actually placed on it. And the other wonderful thing about our industry is that by our very nature, we're very labor intensive. And that's exactly what we need for our country. We need lots and lots of jobs to be created. So our industry literally could be the silver bullet to address our massive unemployment problems in South Africa.
In terms of trends and accommodation, what are you reading into these figures reported by Stats SA? Because obviously it's leading with the hotel accommodation, leading the figures, with other accommodation also making up the numbers. I've seen internationally more and more talk of people who are traveling, leaning back towards hotels, away from the Airbnbs of the world. What trend are you seeing in that regard here in South Africa, or is it too soon to tell?
Yes, we're definitely seeing hotels are gaining popularity once again. At the same time, the little B&Bs, guest houses and outlying areas, chalets have been very, very popular too. So I think there's something for everything. And that's what's so marvelous about our country. We've literally got something for absolutely everyone. And if I can just put the perspective with regards to the stats we just looked at, however, that even though they are marvelous, they are way below what they should be. We're only around about 56% recovery rate pre-COVID from our pre-COVID levels. So everything, when we look at our stats, they've all got to be seen in context of what we were in 2019. And if I could also just say, what's concerning to us is that a lot of our sister African countries have got back to pre-COVID levels and we haven't. If I look at a large hospitality and tourism company in South Africa that also have got good operations in some of our sister African countries. Kenya, for example, their operations are 110%. Tanzania, they're 125% of pre-COVID. Uganda, 135%. Botswana, 90%. Namibia, 80%, but South Africa, it's only like around about 50-odd%.
And Rosemary, if I could come in there, what are the driving factors there? Because I was going to ask you about the cost of living crisis and how that's impacted how people, local people especially, travel, as well as internationally. Are those some of the driving factors, as well as, of course, load shedding?
There are lots of negative reasons, but we definitely need to look at why we're not getting the numbers and our sister African countries are. And it's not like they've also got no problems, they've all got problems. So we really need to have a good look at ourselves and see why we're not getting those figures. But touching on what you mentioned with regards to problems, even though our hospitality and tourism operators are experiencing really good numbers at the moment, and if I can also just say on a positive side, some hospitality establishments, particularly in Cape Town, are experiencing levels that they've never had before. February has been an exceptionally wonderful month for them with sonar and the yacht race. There's just been so much happening. But what is a problem is that the additional income that we're making, unfortunately, we've got to spend on covering for government's inability to provide adequate and consistent water supply, electricity. So a lot of hotels, which would normally be spending this additional wonderful bumper month income coming on niceties to improve the guest experience, they are not otherwise creating more accommodation. They're now having to put into bigger generators, because often the generators they had were really emergency generators. They're not generators that are meant to run, to the extent that they're currently running. They're having to put in groundwater supplies with water filtration systems. We're having to compensate and provide bulk services, which, because we can't possibly not give this to our guests coming in, because it's such a basic necessity. And if I can also just say, I've actually been contacted by an American company, American journalist, who wanted to know what type of advice they could give their travelers coming to South Africa, how they should manage load shedding. And obviously that's the last thing we want to have to address.
Absolutely.
So there really are challenges there, and it's a great pity that the hospitality and tourism industry is having to cover for bulk service provisions, which the problem is you spend all this money and your guests don't see any benefit. It's just like a basic that you're providing.
Yeah, an industry really hamstrung by a variety of reasons. Thanks so much for that insight. Fedhasa National Chairperson Rosemary Anderson joining us virtually there. Still to come, your Newsnight eNCA reporter Puli Jones tracking those developments.